Pleistocene era. At just 15 days old, the pups take their first wobbly steps before a much-needed nap time.
Many of you guys may be aware that an organization called Colossal de-extincted the direwolf. Now this took the internet by surprise, because the direwolf has been extinct for 12,000 years. Now I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but unfortunately, this isn't a true direwolf, or not even close to it. But I do think that this project will still have some benefits in the topic of de-extinction. Now, before I get into why this really isn't a direwolf, I'm going to explain that de-extinction doesn't really exist, at least with the technology that we have now. Because unless a species that we bring back from the dead is 100% the same DNA as, what was once alive, is it really taking it back to life, or is it making a new species? In my opinion, it's kind of a mix of both, because we are using the DNA and the genomes that these species had, but we're going to fill it in with a different species genomes and DNA. So I don't really think that this is de-extinction. I think it's bringing a extinct species back, but instead hybridizing it with another species, if that makes sense. So you might be thinking, case closed, these direwolves are just hybrids. Well, no, actually, these direwolves are most likely just genetically modified gray wolves. In fact, Colossal hasn't even actually confirmed that they even have direwolf genomes. But they have confirmed that they've genetically modified the gray wolves to look like direwolves and have characteristics of what scientists think direwolves will look like and maybe act like, but really they should just act like gray wolves because they'll still have the same instincts. But again, like I said before, even if these contain direwolf DNA, they wouldn't even be true direwolves. Now, I'm not against de-extinction, but Colossal said that this could have benefits to the ecosystem. And while it is true that once one piece comes out of the ecosystem or goes extinct, the ecosystem changes and sometimes falls for the worse or gets worse. The problem with this idea with the direwolf is direwolves went extinct like 12,000 years ago. The ecosystem that they lived in doesn't even exist anymore. So what's their point here? It really does just seem like they're just doing this to make money. I mean, with all the videos that they've posted, and all the views that they've gotten, they've probably already generated a lot of money. And who knows where they're really going with this project. I mean, it doesn't really seem like it's gonna help the ecosystem in any way, or help the biodiversity crisis, because this ecosystem's been gone for over 10,000 years. Now, that being said, I do think that if we were to bring back the direwolf in any capacity, or not even bring back the direwolf per se, just make a wolf that has direwolf traits, or like actual direwolf genes, right? And is genetically part direwolf, then this may be a step in the right direction, because we could use the genes from these genetically modified gray wolves, and then that have characteristics of direwolves, and then merge it with the direwolf DNA to maybe make it look like something that more closely resembles a direwolf, or is more like a direwolf. But again, this doesn't really matter. I think if we did do that, it would really only just teach us more about de-extinction. And the only way I think de-extinction would really help the ecosystem and, help support the fight against the biodiversity crisis is by de-extincting animals and plants, or any species really that has recently gone extinct. Because, the ecosystem hasn't recovered from that yet. And even if the creature that we're de-extincting isn't exactly like its original, it will still play its place if it's, genetically close enough. Because we've seen this with species being reintroduced, or not reintroduced, but species that are alike species that have been extinct in certain areas that, got introduced to the area and kind of took the place in the ecosystem that original species was doing, if that makes sense. if we can make clones of species that exists or existed before that went extinct, that would actually be good for the environment. So I think this project may indirectly, benefit the ecosystem, but at the same time, releasing direwolves into the wild isn't going to do anything. And while I don't think it's necessarily going to have negative impacts on the ecosystem, that's only because the direwolves won't have anything to eat, because they are just like, direwolves, again, the ecosystem that they originally existed in has been gone for over 10,000 years. And if we introduce these bigger gray wolves that are more like direwolves into their native habitat, that might have negative impacts because they're kind of monstrosities. They're not natural. They're artificially selected to resemble something that they're not. And again, these aren't direwolves. They may resemble direwolves when they get older, but they aren't. And it's that simple. I am quite excited to see how these wolves end up looking in their adulthood, because I think it'll be interesting to have like a wolf that actually resembles a dire wolf, so that we can actually like see what they may have looked like. But other than that, I'm not really that excited for this after I learned that it was complete bogus. Because at first I was like, whoa, they brought back dire wolves? But no, they made a creature that looks like a dire wolf and has traits of a dire wolf. And that's about it. I don't think that they used any direwolf genomes or anything like that. I think maybe there's a possibility that they did, but it's not really disclosed if they did or not by them. And it seems like they're just gray wolves that are genetically modified. For example, this cat, originally he was a wild cat, or his ancestors were, and they got domesticated, right? And basically, I can't call him a wild cat or an extinct species of cat just because he's genetically modified to look like one, even though he's not. But if he was, I can't say that he's that, because he isn't. That's not what he is. And I think it's just disingenuous that this organization would do something like that, I do think that Colossal does do some cool things with cloning and does do some cool things with gene modification. But this project is very, very, very misleading, and it seems like it's just a money generation tool, sorry. And yeah, I just wanted to cover this topic before it becomes irrelevant. But yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting to learn that they just kind of faked it, because these aren't direwolves, and I think they're aware of that. Even if they contain direwolf DNA, they still aren't really direwolves. Like most scientists have agreed that even if they do bring back the woolly mammoth, it's still gonna contain elephant DNA. It's still gonna be part elephant, and they've even called it a mammothant or something like that. Like, this theoretical creature that's part mammoth, part elephant is a mammothant, not a woolly mammoth. Most scientists agree that it's not the same thing. It's a hybrid, and maybe it can take the place in an ecosystem, but these ecosystems are gone. And that's why I think de-extinction for these creatures that have been extinct for thousands of years, and where the ecosystem had recovered from their absence, I don't really think it's gonna do anything. And if anything, it's gonna make it worse, or it's gonna make it like, it's just going to be a massive waste of time, because these animals will just die out, right? Because there's nothing to eat for dire wolves, because all their prey doesn't exist anymore. So, it doesn't really make any sense. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. See ya.